iron and partly of clay. So Daniel describes this vision of an image that he says, this is the dream that you saw, King Nebuchadnezzar. You watched while a stone was cut out without hands, which struck the image on its feet of iron and clay and broke them in pieces. So the king sees this image, and then a rock, a huge rock cut out without hands, comes out from nowhere, strikes that image, and shatters it to pieces. This is a dream that you saw, O king. Then the iron, the clay, the bronze, the silver, and the gold were crushed together and became like chaff from the summer threshing floors. The wind carried them away. They all blew away. This, Daniel says, this is the image that you saw. This is the dream that God in heaven gave to you, O king. And God says, Daniel says, there is a God in heaven that reveals secrets. Daniel 2:28. There is a God in heaven that reveals secrets. Is there anything wishy-washy about this statement? That, maybe God can give you this, maybe, or if you do the right thing, maybe this or that. It's very certain, isn't it? There is a God in heaven. There was no doubt in Daniel's mind that there is a God in heaven that reveals secrets. He didn't have any idea what the king had dreamed about, but he prayed and he had a vision that night. Daniel had a living relationship with the God of heaven. He had a connection with the God of heaven, and he knew that the God of heaven had answered his prayers. This is a dream. Now, if you were the king about now is saying, yes, he jumps up out of his chair, his throne, wherever it was, and says, Daniel, that's right. That's the dream I saw. It had completely, gone out of my mind. I could not remember it, but now that you describe it, that's exactly what I saw. And he says, what would be your next question? That's what I saw. Now, what does it mean? What does it mean? And so King Nebuchadnezzar says, this is the dream. And Daniel says, now we will tell the interpretation of it before the king. Okay, you saw this image of various metals, gold, silver. Here it is. Gold, silver, brass, iron, and then feet of iron and clay. This is the image that you saw. What does it all mean? What does it all mean? Now we will tell. Notice this. Daniel says, now we will tell the interpretation of it before the king. Daniel was speaking to the king. He doesn't say, now I'm going to tell you what it means. What does he say? We. Who's the we? God. God, who showed it to me, and then now I will show it to you. So we will tell you, O king, the interpretation thereof. Now, some people say, there's no such thing as prophecy. You can interpret this way and that way, and there's all kinds of interpretations that you can make on prophecy. It's all untrustworthy. Yeah, if everyone has a different interpretation, what are you going to think? There's not much you can tell from it, right? But if God gave the prophecy, God will give the interpretation. All right? That's the key. You must not put your own interpretation on any of God's prophecy. If God gave you prophecy, He's going to give you the interpretation. Okay? If I, put out a piece of paper and ask each one of you, so what do you think this head of gold means? And we'll probably have all kinds of different answers, right? Maybe it means, the richest country that ever was, or maybe the most prosperous country that ever was. The U.S. is actually the most prosperous kingdom that ever was, country that ever was. So it's probably talking about the USA. So what does silver represent? Silver, that's probably the second richest country that ever was. Maybe, who would it be? China now. We can go through all kinds of different interpretations and have all kinds of different thoughts. But is that the way you interpret prophecy? God will give the interpretation. And so now, Daniel says, you, O king, are a king of kings, for the God of heaven has given you a kingdom, power, strength, and glory. Nebuchadnezzar was feeling pretty good about right now, huh? It says, you, O king, are a king of kings. You're great, you're powerful, you're rich. You have a wonderful kingdom. You are a wonderful king. And wherever the children of men dwell, or the beasts of the field, and the birds of heaven, he has given them into your hands, and has made you ruler over them all. And what's the next words here? You are this head of gold. King Nebuchadnezzar hears this and says, hey, that's a pretty good interpretation. I am this head of gold. All right, sounds good. God gives this interpretation. You are this head of gold. But as while Nebuchadnezzar is thinking, some pretty good thoughts here, I wonder what that silver means now. But after you shall arise another kingdom, inferior to yours, then another, a third kingdom of bronze, which shall rule over all the earth. And the fourth kingdom shall be as strong as iron. So, as we see this image, what was that head of gold? What did God say that was? Nebuchadnezzar. It says, you, Babylon, that is the head of gold. But was Nebuchadnezzar the head of gold? Was his kingdom going to last forever? No, there's going to be another kingdom, the silver kingdom, inferior to yours, but another kingdom. And then after that, a third kingdom, and then a fourth kingdom will be coming down the line. So Nebuchadnezzar had, his ego kind of deflated, right? Oh, my kingdom is not going to last forever. Oh, well. Daniel 2:41. Whereas you saw the feet and toes, partly of potter's clay and partly of iron, the kingdom shall be divided. And the curious thing, after the fourth kingdom, God says, there will not be a fifth kingdom. All right? Now, if I were just making up prophecy and listing world history and saying, there'll be this kingdom, there'll be this kingdom, there'll be this kingdom. Let's see, gold, silver, bronze, iron. And I would probably say, okay, then there'll be maybe a copper kingdom, then there'll be a manganese kingdom, maybe a sodium kingdom. And just keep listing metals, in decreasing order of worth. Did you notice that? Gold, one of the most precious metals, then down to silver, then down to brass, then down to iron, which is pretty common. And those metals are pretty indicative of the kind of the moral stature, the worth of each nation that comes one by one. And we'll look into that a little bit. But will there be a fifth kingdom after iron? No, it says, no. After that, the feet and toes, they were partly of potter's clay and partly of iron. The kingdom shall be divided. The kingdom shall be divided. Okay, so King Nebuchadnezzar, as he's listening to this interpretation, says, yeah, that makes sense. That makes sense. That was my dream. And God says, this is the interpretation. Daniel says in chapter 5, let's go a little bit here to chapter 5 and verse 8. Your kingdom has been divided and given to the Medes and the Persians. Your kingdom has been divided and given to the Medes and the Persians. So that second kingdom, that silver kingdom, God tells Nebuchadnezzar exactly which kingdom that will be. Nebuchadnezzar was wondering, well, which kingdom is going to be after mine? God says the silver kingdom, he names it by name. The Medes and the Persians will conquer Babylon. Daniel 5, verse 8. And over in, what about the third kingdom here of brass? Does God reveal the name of the nation, the brass nation? We'll study it more in Daniel chapter 8, but he names that nation by name. The next kingdom after the Medes and the Persians, it was the Grecian kingdom. And in this prophecy, the symbolism is something else, animals. It says, the ram which you saw having the two horns, they are the kings of Media and Persia. Horns in Bible prophecy denote power. And the Medes, the Persians, they had two peoples that came together as one kingdom. The Medians and the Persians, two horns on the ram. And they were fighting with the male goat, which is the kingdom of Greece. The kingdom of Greece. So God specifically says that third kingdom of brass is the Grecian kingdom. Greece will come after the Medes and the Persians. So it's very specific. I mean, God says, you're Babylon. Next, there'll be another nation that conquers you, the Medes and the Persians. And after that, there'll be another kingdom, the Grecian kingdom, that will conquer them. And then the fourth kingdom shall be as strong as iron, insomuch as iron breaks in pieces and shatters everything. Interesting thing here. Gold is very precious, but is it a very hard metal? Actually not. It's pretty soft, right? So you remember when they had gold coins back in the Old West? What was one of the tests for seeing whether it was really a gold coin? Yeah, people actually chew on it. And if it made a little dent in that coin, you knew it was 24 karat gold. If there was any other metal mixed in with it, it would be harder. Because gold is a very soft, malleable metal. That's one of the properties that makes it valuable. But the fourth kingdom, it's not nearly worth as much as gold, but iron is very strong, isn't it? Strong as iron. Shatters anything that you break. You can break stuff with it. Daniel chapter 2, verse 40. And like iron that crushes, that kingdom will break in pieces and crush all the others. So that fourth kingdom must be a powerful kingdom that crushes all the other kingdoms that try to oppose it. Okay? And from history, we know which kingdom followed Greece as the world empire. Remember? The Romans. The Romans. And they were the people who were strong as iron. They went all over the world, crushing all their opponents, and their kingdom lasted for quite a long while. And then the fifth section here. Whereas you saw the feet and toes, partly of potter's clay and partly of iron, the kingdom shall be divided. So the Bible says, after Rome, will there be another world kingdom? It says the next thing that happens is that Rome will be divided. The kingdom shall be divided. It's made partly of potter's clay and partly of iron. Does iron and clay, will it ever mix? Will it ever blend together? It never will. It's like oil and water, right? No matter how much you stir it up and try to get them to join, it will not join. Clay and iron do not mix. And God says, after Rome, the kingdom is going to be divided. And it's interesting. How many toes do we have? 10 toes. Do you know how many divisions Rome was divided into when Rome broke up? 10 little pieces. 10 little pieces. Exactly as God had predicted. Rome actually fell. Rome was never conquered by another country, was it? You probably heard of Gibbon's Decline and Fall of the Roman Empire. Rome fell because it degraded from within. All the immorality, the licentiousness, the laziness, all of this was what actually caused the fall of the Roman Empire, right? Of course, there were tribes from up north that came in and kept harassing the Roman Empire. If the Roman Empire had been strong internally, it would have been no problem. They had crushed all these other huge kingdoms before. These German tribes that were coming in from the north, they could have crushed them easily, were it not for the fact that Rome actually crumbled from within. And it was divided into 10 parts after it fell. Okay, so let's review here. The head of gold is Babylon, 605 to 539 BC. And Babylon was a beautiful kingdom. They say one of the wonders of the world, the Hanging Gardens of Babylon, one of the wonders of the ancient world was right here in Babylon. It was a beautiful kingdom. It's the Bible describes it as a golden kingdom. And one of the chief gods of Babylon was, we talked about this last night a little bit, Bel Marduk. And remember, Daniel's name was changed to Belshazzar, the keeper of the treasures of Bel. Yeah. So Bel Marduk was one of the chief gods of Babylon. And this god was seated on a golden throne. It had a golden table right beside it with a golden candlestick. And his temple was domed by a pure gold dome on his temple. And so the kingdom of Babylon being described as gold is very fitting. Then came the Medes and the Persians, ruling from 539 to 331, the Medes and the Persians. And there were two peoples that came together, and they formed this group, and they came and conquered Babylon. We'll talk more about that later on here. Right now, actually, let's see. The kingdom of Babylon was so rich, so strong, that it was very, you can hardly believe that it would ever be conquered. The walls of Babylon, they said, were like 100 feet high and so thick, so wide, that 2 chariots could race along its perimeter, all around Babylon. It had the Euphrates River was flowing underneath it, so it had an endless supply of water. And historians say that they had, I think it was 20 years worth of food supply within the city at any one time. So, in ancient times, when you tried to conquer a city, you surrounded the city and you tried to block off its water supply, you tried to block off its food supply. Babylon had no problems with either. And when the Medes and the Persians came and surrounded the city, they said Babylon was so confident that they said the guards would go up on the walls of Babylon, and they said they would throw down food to the soldiers and say, "Hey, you guys, you're working hard, you must be hungry. Here's some food for you. Here's a Babylonian sandwich, our treat." I said, "We have food here for another 20 years, no problem. You stay here as long as you like." The water that came in from the Euphrates, no problems with water. They were that confident. But God said the next kingdom would be the Medes and the Persians, and that's the way it's going to happen. Isaiah 44:27. Now this is a remarkable prophecy of the Bible here. Isaiah chapter 44, verse 27. Back in Israel, before Jerusalem was destroyed and all that, Isaiah made this prophecy. Who says to the deep, "Be dry, and I will dry up your rivers." Who says of Cyrus, "He is my shepherd, and he shall perform all my pleasure," saying to Jerusalem, "You shall be built," and to the temple, "Your foundation shall be laid." Let's see, so this is who says of Cyrus. Who knew who Cyrus was? Nobody at that time, because this was written, Isaiah wrote these words 150 years before Cyrus was born. Who was Cyrus? Cyrus was he was the king of the Persians. He was the king of the Persians. And he was one of the kings of the Medes and the Persians who attacked Babylon. And God named him by name 150 years before he was born in Isaiah 44. And he says, "Cyrus, you are my shepherd. You will perform all my pleasure. You're going to do what I want you to do. You're going to take my people back to Jerusalem, and you shall build Jerusalem, and the temple, your foundation shall be laid." So God predicted this 150 years before the Cyrus character was even born. And he says, "You're going to be the one who will go into Jerusalem and go into Babylon and conquer Babylon." Thus says the Lord to his anointed, to Cyrus, whose right hand I have held, to subdue nations before him and loose the armor of kings, to open before him the double doors, so that the gates will not be shut. Some curious words about double doors and rivers becoming dry. I kind of passed over that one, but a few slides before it said, Isaiah 44:27, who says to the deep, "Be dry, and I will dry up your rivers." All this talk about drying up of rivers and 2-leaved gates being left open, what does that all mean? And who is this Cyrus character? And as we study Daniel chapter 2, we begin to find out. How was Babylon actually conquered? This is the Cyrus cylinder. It's an actual artifact in the British Museum in London. And this is the record of how Cyrus conquered Babylon. It's preserved there in the British Museum, and it tells the story of how Cyrus was able to get into Babylon and conquer it. And do you know what the story is? Babylon with its massive walls, the river Euphrates going by, what Cyrus did, the river upstream, they dug a huge reservoir. And they diverted the river Euphrates, they diverted the whole river to flow into this reservoir. And the Euphrates River became dry. So they walked right in under the walls of Babylon, right in under the walls. But the Babylonians had thought of that, and they had another set of inner walls surrounding the edges of the river there, all through that side. And they had gates that were locked on there so that you can get, even if you went under the wall through the river somehow, you still couldn't get into the city. But the Babylonians were so confident of their safety that they were having a great party that night, a feast, a revel. And someone left these 2 gates open, 2 leaved gates that guarded that entrance from the river. And when Cyrus and his men walked under the gates through the river, dry bed of the Euphrates River, they found those gates wide open. Someone had left that open. And 150 years before even Cyrus was born, God had predicted that in Isaiah. He said, your rivers shall be dried, your 2 leaved gates shall be open. And so Medo-Persia became the second kingdom. But then Medo-Persia would not last that long either, right? The next kingdom would be Greece. And who was the king of Greece that did all the conquering? Alexander the Great. Alexander the Great. He was 32 years old when he conquered the then known world, right? 32 years old, and he had pretty much conquered everything. And when he was 33 years old, he was having a party. He was bored out of his mind. He said, there's nothing else left to conquer. And he died because of probably alcohol poisoning, was it? In a drunken stupor. 33 years old. There was another man who died at 33 years old. Jesus Christ. Jesus Christ, as he was hanging on the cross, he was 33 years old when he died. Alexander and Jesus Christ. Alexander had conquered the world. He died having nothing. Jesus Christ had nothing, not even a pillow to call his own, but he conquered the world, and he established the beginnings of his worldwide empire when he died. Who do you want to follow in your life? Someone like Alexander the Great, who's going after money, fame, power? Or do you want to follow the humble carpenter from Nazareth, who said, I am with you till the end of the world? Both died at 33. The next kingdom that came after Greece, Rome. And Rome lasted for many, many years. It was a long-lived kingdom because it was so strong. It destroyed everything in its path. It mowed down all opposition. So Daniel shows to King Nebuchadnezzar, one after the other, in succession, kingdoms come, kingdoms fall, one after the other, one after the other. In specific terms, God showed the king of Babylon, Nebuchadnezzar, what is going to happen in the future. 2,500 years before our time, God showed King Nebuchadnezzar what will happen in the future. Even to naming some of the people who would play an important part in that time. But now, the prophecy, that dream, doesn't end there, does it? All partly the foot made of clay and iron. Daniel chapter 2, verse 41. We're almost at the end here. And in the days of these kings, the God of heaven will set up a kingdom which shall never be destroyed. In the days of these kings, when we're in the place where everything is divided, there will be no world kingdom after Rome, no more one world government. In that time, when people will try to be uniting and try to make another one world government, God says, I'm going to step in and I will set up a kingdom which shall never be destroyed. Yet the strength of the iron shall be in it, just as you saw the iron mixed with ceramic clay. So there'll be some strong kingdoms. We've seen some strong kingdoms come and go since the time of Rome, right? France, Germany, Spain, Portugal, they've had their day, but were any of them ever able to actually unite the world in one kingdom? They've always been fighting, one trying to take dominion over the other, but they've always been in a perpetual state of warfare, right? They've never been able to come together. And as the toes of the feet were partly of iron and partly of clay, so the kingdom shall be partly strong and partly fragile. It never will be able to be a cohesive one empire ever again. So the feet of iron and clay represents the breakup of Rome into those 10 little pieces. We'll study that in other prophecies in more detail later on. But as you saw iron mixed with ceramic clay, they will mingle with the seed of men, but they will not adhere to one another, just as iron does not mix with clay. What does this mean? They will mingle with the seed of men. You saw the iron mixed with clay, but they will try to mingle with the seed of men, but they won't adhere one to another. You know, there were kingdoms in Europe that tried to intermarry with other kingdoms and tried to reunite Europe. The kings of Denmark, Austria, several of those kingdoms were trying to, you marry my daughter and you give me your son and we'll, join our kingdoms. And they had all these family lines. They were scheming and trying to, get things together so that they could have another united Europe once again. Did that ever work? Never. They kept fighting bloodshed, one after the other. They tried to mingle their seed, but they never adhered one to another. And ever since then, there have been people who have tried to set up a one world government again. Charlemagne, Charles V, who's this guy? Hitler. He tried to make a one world government. He seemed to be on the verge of success. He had been had routed the British Army, and it seemed as if almost the British Army would be annihilated at one point. But when the British Army at one point, they had all the German army before them. They were backed up against the sea. It seemed like, it was disaster, that they would completely lose this war. But something about the German tanks, they were caught up in rain. They couldn't get to where they were supposed to be. There was an important general that just all of a sudden decided to take a vacation, and he wasn't there when the day came when they needed to advance. So a key general was gone. And then the fog that had covered the English Channel for a long time suddenly lifted, and the British Army, trapped on Dunkirk, was able to be evacuated. And they evacuated across the English Channel, the famous evacuation at Dunkirk. And the British Army was saved. They were able to regroup. America entered the war, and Nazi Germany was eliminated. There's a very interesting story about A Thousand Shall Fall. This man was what was his name? I forget his name. Was it Mundy? Susie Mundy? I think it was. Anyway, he was a soldier in the German army, Nazi German army, but he was a Christian, and he refused to kill anyone. They issued him a pistol to carry, but he didn't want to kill anyone. He didn't want to be tempted to kill anyone. So he actually threw his pistol in the river, and he carved a piece of wood to look like a pistol and made it black with some shoe polish, and that's what he carried during the entire time he served in the German army. They were advancing toward Russia, and he was an earnest student of the Bible, and he studied actually Daniel 2 very thoroughly, and he knew that God had said there would never be another world kingdom. And so he felt in his heart Germany would never conquer Russia. Germany would never win this war because the Bible said, there would never be another world empire. Was that a safe thing to say in Nazi Germany, especially for a soldier? Nah, he was putting his life at risk. But he read his Bible every day. He studied his Bible every day. He actually started sharing his thoughts with some of his soldier mates that, as they were traveling. And as they were making their way on the invasion of Russia, his captain was very mad at him in the beginning. He said, "Don't ever say that in this place. You're gonna be executed. You're gonna be brought back to Germany and executed for treason. Don't ever share that in front of anyone." But as they were going into Germany, they saw that things were getting hard. And, this soldier, I think it was Mundy talked to his captain and he said, "Captain, I don't think we're going to survive this. We need to make some plans." And by this time, the way he lived his Christian life, this man had gained the sympathy of his captain. And the captain said, "I don't believe in God, but you're a fine man. And you showed me from the Bible, Daniel 2, maybe Germany won't win the war." And he said, "I'll tell you what, just in case, here's what we're going to do." As they made their preparations to go into Russia, he said, "We're going to ration our fuel. We're going to ration our fuel and use as little as possible so that just in case we have to come back and make a retreat, we'll have enough fuel to get back home." And so that unit, as they're making their way to Russia, saved their fuel, scavenged fuel wherever they could. And when the tide turned, and when Russia came in to attack them, they had enough fuel to get back to Germany. And there was a great slaughter of the German army, but this unit was saved because of the faith of this man, the soldier, who believed in Daniel 2, and who believed when God said there will not be another world empire, he put his faith in that, put his life on the line, and told his captain, Germany is not going to win this war. If God said it, you can believe it. As you saw, iron mixed with ceramic clay, they will mingle with the seed of men, but they will not adhere to one another, just as iron does not mix with clay. And there have been many other people. Communism, it looked like, it was taking one country after another, but the Berlin Wall fell and it just collapsed. The Soviet Union collapsed on itself. Very surprising. And then, what about the European Union now, right? There were such great hopes for the European Union, united politically, economically, socially. How's that going? Pretty much a disaster, right? Great Britain is getting out. And now what's going to happen to the European Union? The Bible said they will not adhere one to another. They will not adhere one to another. Verse 44, "In the days of these kings, the God of heaven will set up a kingdom which shall never be destroyed." That's the next step in this vision. After this breakup of the Roman Empire and the seeds of men trying to mix with one another, all these efforts to make another world kingdom, it won't happen. The next thing that happens, God says he's going to set up his kingdom. What did Daniel see? What did King Nebuchadnezzar see? A rock cut out without hands, flying out from nowhere and hitting